So apart from your writing, apart from what you publish or you read in class, do you carry any self-consciousness around just like being public about yourself, having some number of people like know your life story or like hear your constant reflections?
It's definitely been a process over time. I mean, I would say it was terrifying, terrifying, terrifying at first, and it's gotten a little bit easier each time because um although so it's a double-edged. On the one hand, being vulnerable is always vulnerable.
Mm,
It's not like you can't really get immune to being vulnerable in a certain way, or else it means you're not really being vulnerable. Does that make sense? But on the other hand, maybe you just get used to the practice. And so it's still vulnerable, but I'm like, I'm not going to die because I'm vulnerable. In
yeah.
fact, I'm going to get better and I'm going to be happier. And it's just happened over and over and over again that people relate. The more vulnerable it is, the more people actually relate to it. So I'm always trying to take one layer off of what I'm writing, like one layer of protection. And
Right.
sometimes I can't get there. Sometimes it still has, several layers of protection around it, but I try to get underneath.
Has it had any kind of like what has the impact been on your family life, on having two other family members that know you're
Oh,
writing about what's going on under that roof?
oh yeah. Well, a long time ago, Stan said to me, I always knew I was going to marry a writer. I mean, like he knew that way before we met. And also he said, I just give you kind of carte blanche permission to write anything you need to write. Just don't hold back. Okay.
Wow.
So he said that. On the other hand, there have been times where somebody has picked up like an article I've read, maybe in a coffee shop that he hadn't read, and then come back and talk to him about it. And he's like, what the hell?
Yeah. Right.
Well, this one particular one was I wrote about like what fucked up financial situation we were in. And I wrote about it for Bell magazine, and one of his friends read it and was like, hey, I didn't know y'all. So, and Stan was like, oh my God. And so that did teach me when I write about him, I do forward it to him
Yeah.
now and
Yeah.
say, is this okay? And he has never said no. I think he just wants to kind of be given a little bit of a heads up.
Yeah.
Um, and he hasn't read my books.
It-
So that's fine. So I can, that kind of that's a real great safety
yeah.
that I just don't think he has or ever will read them. And my son, Henry, who's 18 now, does not want to and really doesn't plan to read my books.
Wow.
Yeah.
I that I've never stopped to consider that, like, I aspire to write a book at some point, to put my writing together into a book. Um, I've never stopped to consider that the family members might just not read them. And maybe that'd be for the best. I don't know.
It is. Oh,
Yeah.
hope that you can find more and more people who will not read your book. The
Uh-huh.
more people who don't read it, the better off you are.
Mm,
Yeah. And at one point, I don't know, maybe he was 6 or 7 or 8. And moms are always posting about their kids on Facebook. And one day Henry said, you can't do that anymore. You can't post about me. And I had to respect his request.
yeah.
And so what happens is I'll write about him for myself because I have to as his mother, but I don't share it. I don't share it. There are things with my husband and I that I might never share. I might not.
Yeah.
But there are things happen. I don't share everything, in other words.
Right.
It has become very clear to me over time that I do have relationships that are more important than my writing.
Yeah. Yeah. I try, like, there's times where I need to sit down and write about whatever comes to my mind. And the
Exactly.
most personal version of that, the purest version of that is in my own personal journal. That for me
Mhm.
is like separate from what I write in class. But there's times in class too where like I need to go pretty real
Same.
But
Yeah.
I've started to learn that there's a difference when it comes to pressing publish and sharing it with a broader audience. There's a big difference between subjects that I'm looking at in retrospect and have maybe done some healing around, or have like
Absolutely.
put some of my learning to the test, versus like
Right.
actively processing.
Oh, it's so true. It's
Yeah.
so, so true. And so I've written about some really, really rough times Stan and I have had where neither of us look good,
Yeah.
but with the perspective of healing and the
Yeah.
perspective of we did make it through, because this is one of the trickiest subjects for any nonfiction writer, I think, how we write about other people.
Yeah.
And there have been pieces that my mom has read and been pretty upset over. And even like you can't predict how someone will react, because I thought I had drawn her in this very beautiful way. And I was shocked how much she hated it and
Mm,
felt like I was telling things that were not mine to tell.
yeah.
And you know, as someone's child, I kind of just, her life was my life. Like I didn't have a really good separation. Like if I experienced it and knew about it, it was my life. So figuring that out is hard. And some people say, I don't care. I am going to write it and let the chips fall where they may. And it often in those cases, I feel like people have had very destructive family relationships, and severing those cords is actually going to be more healthy for them
Right.
than trying to
Right.
keep those cords attached. But I tell my mom that I have a big book to write about her after she dies. And I do.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I
I
mean,
do.
you and I share that in common, and that we both have a parent that has left this world. And what I can write about my dad now that he's on the other side is
Yeah.
just different. And you know, for me, there's been a whole lot of like, I sure am glad that I stumbled upon this part of myself, this line of thinking, this feeling after he died, because
Oh
this could have
gosh,
been really
yeah.
rough if it had happened while he was still alive.
I know.
It,
Yeah.
you also raise a good point that is something for me to chew on for my life moving forward, which is like the difference between writing about a parent, but writing about your parent and your child. With your
Oh
parent,
yeah.
it's a little bit more like, you were an adult and like, sorry, but you brought me into this world and put me through a life, and
Right.
now, but like with a child, it's like you have a different kind of responsibility to them.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And in the memoir where I did include Henry, it was times when he was very young, and it was,
Right.
you know, there was no way to include his it's just precious. You know,
Yeah.
it's just really, and luckily I did have a very precious child. There weren't a lot of things I had to, you
Yeah.
know, I could just tell the truth and but kind of leave it when he was in that kind of pre-consciousness state,
Right.
you know, before he became kind of, you know, his, and I didn't include anything about him that I think would be revealing really at all. But I
Yeah.
do feel differently about my parents.
Right.
Yeah.
One more question about that before we shift a little bit. I mean, I have seen recent, you know, within the last 6 months, newsletters from you that have either mentioned like a little bit about your feelings on Henry growing up, or his concert, or
Yeah.
and his album's great, by the way.
Oh,
Um, and there's one more I remember. Oh, he made some remarks to you about the war in Ukraine and like how he might respond should there be
oh
more like
wow. Yeah.
American involvement. And so with those, is that do you go to him and ask for explicit permission?
Absolutely.
Mm,
Each one of
cool.
those I was given permission to share. Yep.
Yeah. Mm,
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing that I will add about dads, because like your dad, my dad died in the not too distant past.
yeah.
And it was after his death that I really was able to, like, the memoir came through me in this nonstop, like tsunami kind of
Mm,
way. Um, and that's why the first issue was like 550 billion pages. I mean, the first edition of that book,
sure.
because it was the wave and the flood of that. But I had done quite a bit of writing about him before he died. And there was one particular piece that I was going to publish. So I wanted him to read it first. And it was very painful for him.
Mm, mm,
And I one of the last things I've ever wanted to do in my entire life was hurt my dad, but it also meant keeping a lot of truth away from my dad.
Yeah.
So in a way, in this sharing, it was like giving him a glimpse into the truth of me. And so I don't regret that. I don't
Yeah.
regret that. He kind of had a better picture of how my childhood went than
Yeah.
he did before he read it, or my perspectives on that. And so I think there was an opportunity for healing through that, because we were able to have conversations. And I feel like by the time he died, we were very clean.
Mm.
We were very clear. We had washed a lot out. So I am glad I had the opportunity to share one piece with him that was painful. We never want to hurt somebody. I don't think, especially somebody we love and cherish so much, but it was about getting real. It was about
Yeah.
being honest. That's the kind of writing I do.